problem we have now wanting to become Christians or wanting to develop Christian civilization, which would mean ideally we become more and more undignified compared to what we've been living in.
Mm-hmm.
So the previous hierarchy has to be abandoned.
I see what I see it as is we are having constantly in ourselves to fight the fear of being unlovely. I think Smith was right about why shaming works. That it works because we're
Yes.
so terrified of not being lovely. And that's like the Isaiah I just read. It's like Jesus was unlovely. There is no beauty in him, nor comeliness. We have seen him, and there is no sightliness, and that we should be desirous of him, the man of sorrows. He's and in the medieval depictions, which Tissot is actually, I mean, he's Roman Catholic, so he's getting closer to the imagery I'm familiar with. They go for it with the crucifixion images. I mean, our our favorite director Mel Gibson did too, and it's interesting to realize.
Yes.
I mean, the Passion of the Christ was Catholic, and it's horrific, right? In the degree to which he's showing
Yes.
Christ transformed from this, beautiful masculine carpenter cares for his mom, to this just the Isaiah passage, right? Just from head to toe, nothing but wounds. And I mean, and in the Passion of the Christ, they do it, in kind of real time. I mean, the movie's not quite the full day, obviously, because it's not a full day to watch it. But you feel like how quickly Jesus went from alive to dead, from the garden where he's praying to his arrest to this, judgment to the crucifixion to dead in less than 24 hours. And it's interesting in the British discussion about how to represent him, that they don't want him to lose his awe and majesty and dignity, and it's humiliating having him speak in ordinary colloquial 20th century English. All of this constant, and I say this resets all the time, right? And I do say this is it's a problem in our e-duchies, because like you might get embarrassed in a conversation, you might lose an argument, you might be a little bit made ridiculous or something like that. But the problem in our lives is you may recover from that embarrassment and then be tempted not to go through it again. That is going to hit every single time, right? I've been conscious of that myself. Is like we're doing it right now, right? That Three Cheers for White Men was, I published that post in 2015. The first flame out attack on me because of it was in January 2016. The next year was, been blogging about Milo. 2017 coming up, day after tomorrow, the anniversary of Berkeley, and that humiliation and what followed on that. Then it's like it seems like every single year there's a new version of this test.
Yeah.
And I mean, Yay for me has been a strong one this past year, because it's like, say, I was introduced to his music by Jonathan Pageau at Cantius, and by thinking about what he's saying as Christ is King, he's standing there saying Jesus is King, and white lives matter. And I love, and I'm not even sure I can say it right now, I still have that little bit of decorum left, that I don't want that shame out there. That's the test.
Yeah.
And
he wants the end of Adam Smith on the culture.
Oh, Ye definitely does, and he is literally one of the, on the one hand, feel that you can say passed that test, that he was willing to look at Christ as King and say, everything for you. I will not protect myself from the shame.
No, it does. It keeps coming back. Like it's the same thing. It is. I think it's especially potent for. It's been especially potent for Catholics that have integrated into the Whig system in Australia, because they've suddenly come into a culture that has different shame mechanisms. And I watched the generational changes in the Wogs here. They became more anglicized. They lost their Mediterranean approach to doing things and to behaviour. Not entirely, but I saw how they changed. And then you see it in the great grandchildren, the grandchildren, great grandchildren, where they start to reflect on their grandparents' behavior. Obviously, it's a generation gap thing, which is going to exist anyway, but it's more this kind of quaint nostalgia and amused embarrassment at the way that the grandparents are so ethnic.
Mm-hmm.
When I see that in someone, I think you're dying now. You need to stop. And not all of my friends have it, but some of them do. And the ones that have it, they seem the most miserable. The ones that don't are the ones that are, they're rejecting Adam Smith.
Mm-hmm.
They can feel that they're constantly being offered an exchange. It's like, okay, you can exchange your ethnicity and you'll get this more respectable standing in this particular system. But it's a trick, because they're losing their expressiveness. They're losing their ability to look ridiculous, which was the key to the joy of that culture. That's what I liked about being around, and I still like about being around Mediterranean peoples. They seem more ready to be ridiculous.
I put it to you possibly because you were visiting, not in theirs. I mean, I think Jesus is also constantly showing that shame stuff reactivates all the time.
But I suppose I'm just kind of giving a picture of what that looks like, in that. That's how I understand the problem in this particular, like, in that particular example. I'm just giving an example of it. The shame thing exists in all cultures, right. I know. Like, that's the best way I can kind of describe it, where you go, okay, how does it look? It looks like, to me, being brought into an environment where you have to maintain status in polite society. What does that, migration is the same experience, I suppose. That's why I'm using the example, because you're abandoning something that you are doing to assimilate into this new place.
Right. Well, and this will be the frustration that people have with the go back to Adam Smith and all the movement of peoples is, I think, fundamentally the reason that people don't like one, economic and land ownership and actual safety and stuff like that. But when you move across cultures, you're not affected by all of their shame mechanisms or their behavior rules. And so those new people coming in just seem unruly and to have no rules. They probably do have rules, but you don't know theirs.
Oh yeah,
the Anglo version is the one that we're working with in this context, and we've looked at that level of the way they're working with sentiment and stuff like that. But I think a lot of what's the cultural, which is a new. We're now sailing off into another topic right now, having like gazed at Christ and wept a little bit. The feeling of not having control over those unruly masses is because those unruly masses won't accept your shame mechanisms.
Well, yes. So it's having a completely different set of shame mechanisms. Right. Christ has a different set of shame mechanisms to the world.
Yes.
Being the Messiah. This is kind of, I was trying to link it to. We're supposed to be dealing with the shame mechanisms of the kingdom, not the shame mechanisms of this world.
Beautifully put. Yes.
Yeah. I had to get there.
You were starting to party with the Greeks. That we should be operating by Christ's shame of the kingdom, and we keep falling back into the shame of the world. Now we're back to the shepherd and his sheep, but recognizing that it was always an image of Isaiah taking care of us. But to get to him holding the little sheep in the white 90 and being the Chad guy with the sheep, he had to go through, let's go back through that a little bit, an awful lot. And I think we also have themes that we want to build towards about masculinity, which we've kind of gestured towards here, femininity, all of those. But I've been thinking about the Adam Smith thing, recognizing that, I did like Adam Smith for, the brief moment that I was labeling myself conservative, which, okay, fine, we've sailed off onto another labeling, but that literally the Wealth of Nations is underpinned by a morality of feelings. That's a hilarious recognition of, oh my goodness, it's the two sides of the same coin phenomenon again, right? It's like you get free market capitalism, SJWs, and it's the same guy.
The bureaucracy of feelings.
The bureaucracy of feelings. Well, Mel is saying Curie liaison and sea shanties. Mel asking, De La Salle is a baddie. No, I think we're just all sinners in this. I mean, De La Salle is actually a saint. But the Christ-like problem, and I think actually Ye does that well in that song, is we're constantly using it as a shame mechanism to bash people back into the worldly behaviors, right? That's not Christ-like. You shouldn't be yelling at me. And to be Christ-like, one, the willingness to take on the shame in order to not bow to the world, not take the ticket. I mean, big levels, but also not take the little tickets of, lying, right? I read that passage from De La Salle about lying, turns you vicious like that. Right? Lying in little things means you become, more and more worried about hiding. The shame kicks back in, right? So that we're trying to train ourselves out of that. And I'm finally back fencing, which is good, right? And fencing is a very physical way of making sure that you're having to deal with this constantly, because you just got hit. You have to acknowledge it. It's in the rules of the Saul. Salute your opponent and and acknowledge hits. Literally in the rules on the wall. It says, this is very aristocratic, right? Salute your opponent, acknowledge when you made the mistake and you got hit. You don't get to boast around and go, ha, 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 smack bash, right? I see you get that, right? I see that a lot in our e-duchies, where people they won't acknowledge when a good point has been made. They won't acknowledge when they lost track of the conversation and said something that contradicts something later. It's like we got a whole layer of not, I think, intellectual problems here, but the constantly trying to make sure you're not being shamed, rather than just saying, oh wait, you made a good point, thank you, that taught me something. Or and conversely, rather than, I've been, people try to shame me all the time too, because I'm saying that's wrong, you said this later, oh well, now you're being nasty, you grandma. And I'm like, okay, but
nasty.
I still notice that you contradicted yourself, and I'm not going to be nice about it so that you like me and don't make me feel unlovely, right? It's a monastic discipline, a fencer's discipline, but it's this, ultimately we're trying not to let the fear of the shame prevent us from acknowledging the truth.
Which is what artists need to do, and art will die if we are unable to do this. And this is why art has died.
Yes.
Because artists are constantly living on the precipice of massive shame all the time. And the crushing neurosis over being judged by what we produce is almost excruciating at times. Even for basic things, because, I mean, you have to be sensitive anyway. Not moral sensitivity sensitive, but you have to be sensitive to be a good artist in the first place, in the sense that you're plugging into feeling and energy and human nature and everything. Then you've got to produce your vision and perception of it all, what you want to say about everything, and then just invite judgment on yourself. It's horrible. And if you can't do it, you're not going to make anything worth saying. The art that we're given is awful for a reason. People are not taking risks. They're terrified of being shamed of making the wrong art.
As we saw with the pictures at the beginning, yes, that they were constantly being shamed by. I mean, going back to the Catholic, it's like we don't want this to be too Catholic. We don't want this to be. It's like I had not put that together. And what you've just done beautifully, I think, is tie together the truth, the goodness, and the beauty. The art must be truthful, or it's ugly.
It has to be true, or it's not beautiful.
Amen.